with what is being presented, but to attentively listen to what is being presented. Where there needs be, there will be a chance for clarity-seeking questions. And clarity-seeking questions will not be arguments. It will be clarity-seeking questions. And I will make a determination whether this is a clarity-seeking question or an argument, and I will as such. On the side of the present arguments and presentations, if you were unable to complete your presentation in 10 minutes, the clarity-seeking question time is not an opportunity for you to continue with your presentation, but it's an opportunity to respond to the clarity-seeking questions. I suppose you are at one. Yes. The program is before us, members. We have an apology here from Honorable Carter, who is the only apology that we are having. Oh, can we have other apologies if there be? Honorable Mkweli?
Thanks, Chair. Our Deputy President, Rambo. Thank you. And President Julius Malema is on Pan-African Parliament in Rwanda. Thank you.
Any other apology? Honorable.
Our committee this morning, due to some engagements in the House this afternoon. Yeah, so we have to prepare.
Thank you. I want to apologize for Dr. Lutwich. She will be coming, but she'll be late.
According to Mashati, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Mashati, yes, from AFASA.
Honorable chairpersons, honorable members, and also the guests who are and presenters who are here, on behalf of the African Farmers Association of South Africa, I would really like to greet you and thank you for the opportunity for AFASA to be given to come and present here. I am the African Farmers Association, AFASA. I am here with one of the members representing the Commodity Association of the commodity, which is sugar, under the organization SAFTA from South Africa. So we are both here. The name of the deputy chairperson is Ms. Lindiwe Shobi, and the two of us will be representing, and she'll be assisting with the questions as well of clarity. Just in terms of time, mine is basically come and clarify our position, and long before the discussion of expropriation without compensation, which has been started by this House, comes from a very long process that was specifically focusing at district level with engagements and dialogues. Prior to October 2016, we took a memorandum of understanding of issues to the then President Zuma at the Union Building. And the issues that I'm going to raise here, they were specifically focusing on land and water. And we were grateful that this opportunity was opened because we could place the practical issues that Black farmers are dealing with in terms of a national platform that is presented for us to address them. So AFASA, just briefly, was started in 2011 It is an association with close to 300,000 members. The majority of the members are small-scale farmers. It also includes cooperatives and subsistence farmers. We also have commercial farmers, but generally a farmer organization. We also have, as I indicated, the commodity associations that are affiliated. They are red meat, sugar, so various commodities, wildlife that are affiliated. So the position that we're presenting here covers those. What I'm going to focus on is specifically what we are saying as a FASA is that the plight farmer in this country is one of the worst, because the failure of land has disadvantaged black farmers. And in a sense, this presents a problem because we know about the ills that faced farm workers. And this also includes all those categories. But ours is going to specifically also focus on the farm workers. So we see the land reform failure being on the issue of identification of who the beneficiary is. We see the land failure being also in terms of the settlement support, that the farmers are actually not getting, and partly is a generic problem of a structural inadequacy from a training perspective in terms of access to skills, to issues of access to eyes to more in private sector being mainly for white establishments and black farmers having a say. Is a proposal that says farmers have analyzed very specifically the issue. The root of those land reform failures is the following. One, the failure to implement the legislation that exists as well as under the current constitution. But we go further to from the disinvestment as far as black farmers are concerned of the government spending on agriculture that has continued to go down. These figures are showing generally that the commitment in terms of support of black farmers has been at the center of this problem. But what we are in coming back to the issue of the root causes, we're saying in terms of the value chain of land reform is actually a big issue in terms of corruption, in terms of collusion between private sector as well as government. And is that the current legislation does not address some of the specific issues. Land restitution has been inefficiently implemented, but we are sitting with a situation where we do not have land redistribution laws that can assist in the redistribution of the land. So the absence of legislation also of dealing with expropriation of specifically agricultural land with or without compensation has also complicated the matter even further. And the implementation of the proposals that have come through the National Development Plan, the fact that they are not legislated but voluntary, makes it difficult for people to actually align with what is being there. So at the end of the day, we sit at the mercy of who the official is at that moment and how nice they would want to be. On the other hand, we sit at of being assisted by the white farmers. Whoever is nice or not nice, you are at that mercy. There's a structural problem of a system that just has not worked. What are we proposing then? We are proposing that we specifically address the issues of legislation. We would like to ensure that we have specific legislation that addresses the issue of expropriation with and without compensation. And further, to say we recognize the constitution expropriation with some problem because that's and equitability. And in application, we have had serious problems of non-adherence to that, but at another level, we provide clarity on the matter of expropriation, because what has happened is that the focus has been on a market-based approach, and we believe that this has failed us. And linked to that is the expropriation, the issue of willing buyer, willing seller. So we propose that the Constitution is pushed to amendment for clarity as far as the area of expropriation without compensation. Because whilst we appreciate the presentation of the possibility of the expropriation without the bill, which could include expropriation without compensation in specific areas, we also are concerned that this is going to result in that being contested and us being stuck in an unconstitutional resolution. So ours is to say we are pushing, lastly, for a whole dispensation.
I'm sorry, Doctor, I think we have run out of time.
Okay, so we're pushing for a dispensation for a transformative and comprehensive land reform.
My good doctor, thank you very much. Honorable Zimandi, thank you very much. There you have it. Do you have any clarity seeking question? Honorable Swart, Dr. Melder, Honorable Mabe, Honorable Mutapo, Honorable Mukwili, Honorable Filtani.
Thank you, Chairperson. And I'd ask the doctor just to comment on the issue of 9 of 20. I'd ask clarity on your proposition that the state lacks the capacity to effectively implement, monitor, and enforce land policies. On the issue of clarity, should expropriation without compensation be allowed? Is it not problematic, given your statement here, that the state lacks the capacity, and given what the evidence we've heard about corruption in the state departments, will that not aggravate the situation and not contribute to land reform? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chairperson. I'm here. I would like to thank the doctor for the presentation. Just one remark and then a question or two. On page 8, at the top, paragraph 4.3, you make the statement to say most of the land availed on the market and bought by the state is unproductive. We all know that that is not the case. We've got many examples and we all know that. Page 3 of your document, paragraph 1.5, you state 300,000 black farmers. A farm currently. And in connection then with that, I've not heard you say anything about traditional land. In other words,
Thank you, Co-Chairperson. Thank you very much for the presentation. It's sincerely appreciated. I just want to get maybe a view from the presenter.
In terms of the issue of compensation, or let's say the issue without compensation, I just wonder, what is your view? Should it apply to all forms of land, or should it be only be restricted to certain portions of land? For example, development, unproductive land, and so on. Can I just get your view on that? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Dr. Sabularama. My question is based on your recommendations on page 20, the last page. The very first recommendation, 9.1, you speak about, you recommend the establishment of an agrarian ombudsman. It's something unique. Can you explain more about that? What informs that, the objectives of that office? Thank you.
And thank you so much also for at least giving us recommendations, especially on page 13 of the into this matter, because others just come and they don't dwell much into giving us solutions. Thank you so much, Chair. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Doc, for the presentation. My question to you, Doc, is that your recommendation is that Section 25 of the Constitution must be amended to allow expropriation without. There is an outcry as soon as the land is expropriated. Now, I want to check with you, Doc, with your research that you have done. Do you see that as an immediate thing, or as an event that can happen in a country where, when the Section 25 of the Constitution is amended, there will be a race war? Another question for me is that how are you presently? You said you are representing about plus minus 300,000 black farmers. Now, I want to check the status, the current status where you are operating as black farmers currently. How is the environment that you are operating in, especially where the land, most of the land is in the hands of the white people? How does that affect your operations? Lastly, is the issue of accessing funds as emerging black farmers. Do you access funds, and how are you struggling, if you struggle, to access funds and to access the means of banks and all those economic hubs in the country? Thank you very much.
Statement so that you respond in context. South Africa has high levels of food insecurity, and you take it upon yourselves to produce food. You say you have over 300 farmers in your association. Be more land made available to. What is the average size of a farm? In economic sense, as well as to help to address the social needs, in particular food insecurity. Motion we passed in Parliament was about amending the Constitution in order to satisfy a public cause, and that's why I'm talking about the social needs. We've gone past a situation where people just farm for profit purposes, and that's why I want to know. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to, if you could explain what you mean when you say land. Put differently, what are you proposing to be? And then On page 11, you indicate that you want distribution will harm the South African economy. You know, that argument has been raised many times that we must be careful that we don't harm. And you're saying it's a myth that if we transform, it will harm the economy. If you could just expand on that one. And then finally, somewhere in your document, you talk about water rights should be attached to property and not to ownership or something to that effect. I just don't know where, but it was somewhere in here. If you could talk to me about what's your understanding of the water rights, or what are you proposing exactly around water rights? Chairperson.
What we were saying was not true. Don't be tempted to argue back. We believe that what we were saying was true. Fire on. You have not more than 10 minutes.
Thanks, Chair. You're not going to have that problem. And I would like to thank the honorable members for having gone through our document and for the questions. Let me quickly address them. Firstly, the issue of the state capacity is something that we raise because we believe that the Senate reform problems and failure resource, financial resource. So in a sense, it is about resources to address the issues you're talking about. So the condition of the state capacity is not a permanent state. It is a matter that can be addressed, and it is a matter that we believe through this process we are able to address, and already working together with the state, with private sector, all of us now currently engaged in those discussions. We believe that we can deal with that decisively. So I mention that if Parliament, civil society, as well as government, private sector come together and have the people, we just don't have the right people at the helm right now. Linked to that is our dispensation is not the right one in addressing the right issues. And there are proposals around bringing a more effective and efficient approach in addressing, in targeting the farmers directly, which forms part of the proposals we made. So there's an issue that says most of the land is not, it's not true. We have added to what we have presented, particularly we have dealt with. And we've also participated in terms of the plus farms that is not productive. So it is a fact that most of the land that has been acquired and in former homeland areas, you know, the state of that land. And the approach or principle of willing buyer, willing seller is the center of government getting unproductive land. Because what happens is I'm a development planner. You need to plan, you know, get an agro, you know, condition of the land, have a plan of the market, of the people, and what that soil can give you. And you are able to say, the land that I'm acquiring is going to deal with this. We don't have that luxury in this country because we have a situation where you cannot deal at an area base and say this is what is needed. You sit up one day and say, I am willing, and here is a piece of land that I'm putting forward. So basically, the structure is not conducive. So the people who become willing are not necessarily those who provide you with the most productive land. So it's a situation which is a fact, and also the prices which are so high for the productive land are also creating problems. So that is an issue, and we have the specific pieces of land that we have been tracking across the board. So, and that is why we're saying more of it. We're saying most of it. Where do these farms farm? We have a combination of farmers as AFASA. Some of them farm on communal land. They are subsistence farmers, in cooperatives, on land that has been acquired by government. They are of AFASA at this point on these leases, which are not signed, 3-month leases, and it's been a push from our side to get title deeds on some of this land. So others have acquired land on their own by purchasing land. A combination of people farming across in terms of these areas. And at the hearings, a number of AFASA members were there, and they were actually highlighting directly and personally in terms of the problems of overgrazing as far as communal land is concerned. One farmer even highlighting that his cattle feed on pampers, which are soil disposed. So there is a serious problem there, but it is an area that through this process will be. So the demand for land has to deal with Lindiwe's piece of land now. The debate that we're having is for the future of the people of this country. So it is not of where am I farming now. It is a debate of how do we make sure that we address issues of justice and equality and productivity for everybody. So the traditional land forms, which were already showing that homeland land is already overgrazed. There is generally a land problem. And the issue now is not to perpetuate the spatial inequalities and push people further into homelands, which is where they are. What we are talking about is making land available so that people can be part and parcel of production across the board in the value chains that are not mainly in a particular area. But we are having serious discussions with the traditional leaders and are actually looking at models of ensuring that we have security of tenure beyond just the land that individual communities own and have titles as far as CPAs are concerned. So this forms part of the package, and basically it is something that we are strongly dealing with. The compensation, which land proposal, we make it very clear in terms of specifications where we believe very strongly considerations because of expropriation of land without compensation, and where we elaborate further in our document, because I don't want to go through each and every one of that, and the chairperson is on my case. But we do specify in terms of possibilities of expropriation without compensation. And the establishment of is another area. We came up with it already in 2016. The injustices and the end, as well as the cases that results in. And even when cases, lawyer who will fight for you, it is when farmers are pushing for an amendment because they want a clarification. Because what happens is that you can push for expropriation without compensation. But the problem is that be contested to be unconstitutional. And that can put us in a situation that we sit in courts for life. And the ombuds is to specifically address the issues of people who are in these situations of being exposed to dispossession and injustices and evictions, and also unfair practices as far as the issues of the just and equitable pricing model is concerned. The race wars, we do not believe that there could be race wars. We as AFASA have been working very closely with the 3 other unions in NAFU and also HrH and DAO. And our focus as part of that has been to specifically address our issues of diversity, but also look at the concerns on the other side. What is good with that process, because it's been an ongoing process, is that recently we announced a collaboration of all of these where we're working towards a national agricultural plan. And all 4 agreed that the current land reform situation is not feasible, and we are working towards some.
Thank you very much. Many of your questions might not be answered, but in the interest of time, those who feel very strong that they need answers, they can get the answers in writing from the doctor. We have run out of time.
Now is the issue of land ceilings. It will be very important to be given guidance. But
quickly deal with that, because the critical issue here is that we're sitting with 98% of water rights sitting with white establishments. So basically, our push is that there is no way that we can deal with that. We need to align water rights to the property, because right now, if the individual goes, the rights move with the individual. And there are changes within the department right now to address the legislation. But we believe that that needs to be addressed urgently. So the second part linked to the issue of land ceilings, we actually are working on the research at this point. We cannot give you a particular figure because it is something that we don't deal willy-nilly. We are very cautious to put a number and say, this is what you give to a farmer, because we, even amongst ourselves, you've got farmers who have less than 1 hectare to farmers who require, in terms of the production capacity and the market needs, hundreds of hectares. So the issue is in terms of particularly looking at this at a broader level, issues of foreign ownership, and that is something we would rather present our proposition on that.
Okay. Thank you. And thank you very much, Doctor, for your presentation.
Thank you so much.
I believe the next presenter here will be.
Sorry, Chair. My apologies, Chair. Are you going to ask the presenter to not answered, and she might like to supplement to the committee? Thank you, Chair.
That's all.
Okay, that's
On that particular issue. Our next presenter here, according to the problem, and Cultural Heritage Forum. Are they around? Okay. I thought they could give space. That's Mr. Sindiso Solontsi.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, for the opportunity to everybody assemble. My name is HrH Emmanuel. I'm representing the Tswana Cities and Cultural Hill Kingdom based in Ngamakwe, including the traditional locations of Butterworth, Tsomo, and Aitu area. So I appreciate the opportunity. I'm here because of my role of being involved on the land process from the age of 16, 17 in Umtata. We bought a land from Zambule in Thornhill Farm. That land by fellow neighbors, but we shared it amongst each other. As well, I'm here because I responded with my people. Also, whom I expected will be part of this panel, Chief Masela from Kailicha, who is representing the Khoisan, and also Pikicha, who is the current chairperson of the Amamfengu Kingdom. But due to some other commitments here, but we appreciate the opportunity. We'll be representing as well the social cohesion programs of Contralesa, which recently was formulated on the 6th of August in SLN Park in Pretoria under the chairperson of Dr. Matola Motseha. So at the position on the land, we support expropriation of land without compensation because our people have suffered the most injustices in South Africa, from colonial regimes, from people who came in our country illegally and also took the land by force, with the multitudes of our people who were assassinated on the Ngaiqibi Wars, famously known as the Frontier Wars. Those wars started during the early 1700s and they ended in 1889. My uncle, Chief Pikicha from the Royal House of Dlamini House, was the grandson of the first leadership that met during the time of Bishop Alif in Butterworth, who took our people to Epid to form a treaty during the times of the wars. So our people, they formally agreed to have a treaty with the British Queen Victoria, and some of them, they joined the workforce of white people, and some of them were the white forces. But that treaty was broken based on the distrust that came out from the relationship that we were trying to establish with the Europeans who were here. So in 1880, Uncle Pikicha was invited to England during the time of Victoria to be thanked for their role. But for now, we are responding because most of our land was lost in those wars, starting from here in Cape Town, and most of our people were driven to what is famously known as the homelands in Transkei. They ended up in the Kai River. That's where the wars ended up, in Sky along the Fish River. So we have realized that in this present time, it's very necessary that as the current government is pursuing this program, it's very convenient that the traditional authorities, they should be given maximum recognition and contribution and ultimate working together with the state of South Africa, which is a democratical institutions. Where I come from, there have been a lot of questions from the country at the present moment about the role of traditional leadership and what they can play at this moment. But people seem to forget that traditional leadership have been here and they've played a significant role in governing the country and contributing in terms of agriculture. I grew up under the education of KG Matanzima, who was the first state black South African to lead a government here in South Africa in 1963 up until 1970. KD made a very exemplary, good example to generate a very huge amount of economy through agricultural science, which amounted to 450 billion and above during the long time period, of which it was an aristocracy having democratical institutions within it. So we feel that the process of handling the land of the Section 1 needs to be amended, and we should allow expropriation of land without compensation to proceed. And also all the past disadvantaged communities, they need to be appropriated their human rights by being given back their forefathers' property, which is meaning their inheritance, their lands, and everything that prevails there. And all the rural communities and land property that is under the administration of the traditional leaderships, it should be kept in that state. And some of the land is actually been taken. Most of our people, they can still remember, because that process of taking the land by force is something that has been also continuously happening, not only from 1652. Most of our people, we still have them today. They still locate the land that was taken from them, and they have never been given. The government have never done any program to give those people back that land. So we feel that there should be a program, and we have generated a program now of an audit whereby we have consulted with all our people. Most of our nation resided in Northern Cape, Eastern Cape, and in Namakwe, original Namakwe, the original of the Nama people, Namakwa, and that's why they were calling this area Namakwa, because some of them, they migrated to Namibia, and some of them went to Botswana, while others were in Tswane. Most of them have been called Amahlubi, but we are different tribes. So we have reformed our nation of Amamfengu to be called by the old nation of Abantu, which means the Bantu nation. Because we believe that in the current misunderstandings that people, they don't understand about who we are as South Africans, there have been a lot of the same people. In anthropology, I've done this research. I have evidence to prove our existence in this country, which is 2,000 years ago. White people, they know about our existence in this country. That is not only from the time they came here. It's more than 2,000 years. And we have evidence of pottery, a lot of artifacts to prove our existence, and also our agricultural efforts in terms of practicing agriculture within this country. When white people came, they found us with cows doing agriculture. We lost a lot of all those properties. Our people are suffering today. Justice that we have recovered as well, which was signed by Sir George Grey in 1855 for Amamfengu Nation, which includes the areas in Cape Town, in Port Elizabeth. We have tabled a program to reclaim those locations, but we believe those are not the only locations that we can be claiming back. So we hope that the government is going to assist us in that regard. Families in rural and urban areas should retain their property without any interference from state or municipality offices. But the traditional leadership is to monitor the process in a just and fair, transparent manner, known to the culture of now with so many other nations residing here. However, there have been other people who came from various locations. So we believe that the South African land belongs to the communities of this continent, which means the Abantu, the Khoi, the San, and also at this present moment, we welcome all the other people who come and reside in this country, but we wish that our heritage and culture should be considered and respected according to the Constitution, as we have the National Heritage and Resource Agency, which actually approves the recognition of communities and also the UNESCO traditional recognition. Thank you. Thank you, Chairperson. You can wrap up. In closing, I would love to see that after this program, we will have a balanced approach that the government can work side by side with the traditional communities and also with the formula that we will be presenting with the government in terms of how the we believe that it will be a successful program. Thank you very much.
Members, Honorable Smith, there's only one claim.
Yeah, thanks, Chair.
Honorable Filter.
Thanks, Chair. The presenter spoke about the land should be given back to the people. Are you suggesting people get title deeds? Or who owns the land? That's the first question. When you say that the land should be given back to the people, and at the same time, you also talk about the role of the chiefs and so on must not be touched. We know that in those areas, there's no title deeds. So are you suggesting we give those people title deeds, or how do we handle it when you say give it back to the people? And then just, I'm very curious, somewhere here you say traditional land should not be sold to foreigners unless foreigners married and live in that area. Who exactly are foreigners? When you say it should not be sold to the foreigners, who are you talking about exactly when you say foreigners? Thanks, Chair.
I just want to get this clear. Is your submission saying that you agree with amendment of section 25 of the opposition? And how do we then distribute the land? What is the summary of your submission? It has been expropriated to that related to what of this of you.
Thank you.
You say specifically that you want section 25(1). How would those people acquire land? How would their property rights be protected if section should replace section 25(1)? I know that's the primary subsection that protects property rights, which is very much at the center of this whole debate, since we started. So I would like to know now, if it were to be amended, how would you want it to be reworded? Secondly, would you confirm that you are more about protecting heritage in South Africa? Thank you.
Okay. Currently, the traditional communities in lands, as a result of our inheritance, using title deeds for lands in those times of our tradition, until the new forms of governance that were introduced during the colonies, during the time of Sir George Grey. I have the trustees that were given by deeds does not cover all the areas that our nation was residing on them. So the trustees in this present time, our position on trustees, we working to have the traditional leadership whole body opening a trust for that whole community that it is representing. And the people who are part of that traditional community will then be given portions of land after the consultation. Traditional leadership areas of all the country is a form of a social cohesive effort to bring this general formula for everybody to have a generalized approach of how the process can be handled. But when it comes to the trustees, we believe that the traditional leadership must be the one that is handling that, and then the people who are part of that community can then have a sharing of that land. And also, he spoke about the program of distribution, how it should be handled. The program of distribution, we are working on having a program whereby, as a traditional leadership, we have a formula whereby it's been operating for all these centuries, but that formula is not been documented according to the modern ways in terms of putting it on paper. So what we are proposing now, because there's been a gap when it comes to the modern ways of governance and traditional leadership, but we'll be adding more in relation to this bill of amending section 25.1 of the Constitution so that it can relate to all their communities. And also when it comes to that as well, we are still having issues of concern because other land we haven't really. So that is another process that, and also when it comes to the process of how the Constitution will be amended and the details of that process, how are we going to handle it? We support the process of expropriating the land without compensation because that land was not bought. So we don't believe that people should buy back that land. The land it should be distributed to the people. In my own place where we reside, people they don't buy land from a chief. They either submit a or a goat, and then they will be given a portion of land, which is quite a reasonable amount of land for farming, for having your family. And also coming to your question of a foreigner, who is a foreigner? In Africa and also in South Africa generally, specifically, we have the indigenous communities, which are the Khoi, the Abantu, the other tribes, which are mostly belonging to the children of Ham, the son of Noah, during after the flood. So they have been migrating all over the continent. We have many tribes now. Those are the indigenous communities of Africa, and it's protected by the United Nations Bill and Acts. But when it comes to a foreigner, it means any person who comes from outside the borders of South Africa, and also more especially from another continent. But based on the present reconciliations of the country, whereby we're having a lot of other people who are residing here, Chinese, Indians, we're not discriminating against those people. To the issue of marriage, when it comes to the issue of marriage, we are considering marriages within our families, within our own nations. It would be an African within our location to marry within our own location. Giving out of ownership of that land is something that must be monitored on the traditional leadership process. So that one is something that is on a development program because we are compiling now a document in relation to how this process should be handled. And then closing up with the issue of the amendment again to your questions of how the details of the amending of the land, section 25.1 and the property details. The issue of the land, we believe that the government at this present moment, it should work to give the people the land and amend the constitution to give the people without compensating them without buying that land. The people mustn't buy the land, they should be given the land for free. And also the process whereby I spoke with the chief Ramadan in Pretoria. The chief gave me a portion of land there because I was discussing with him. My family those were the sons of Unlo from Umasok, from the original Ngoni house of traditional leadership. But when it comes to how of amending the constitution, and now that the government assists the general population, because there will be a process of tension now whereby people they don't want to leave that land that they've occupied. We don't say that people who are white people mustn't have the land, but the land must be redistributed to everybody fairly. so everyone can have the land to reside and also have the land to farm. The process whereby the Department of Rural Development there is putting a lot of requirements on the form when you apply for land. They want you to have a degree in agricultural science and all that. It's a long process, which is very our people. When it comes to the training of agriculture, we grew up doing agriculture. It's an inherited heritage. We learn it from the family, from our grandfathers. It's something that we're doing. We don't go to school for it, but we don't discourage going to school, having degrees. I've also studied agriculture. I know the technological. We promote that everybody must be given the land without having a qualification on agriculture. People will be trained. I'm glad that there is a African Federation of African Farmers, which we can bring on board to partner. We work together. We train all our people to practice modern farming and also economical benefits of farming in terms of exporting. Most of the land here is owned by foreign people in South Africa, which is quite a very wrong process. So we wish is very, very fundamental. When it comes to the ownership, we believe that our traditional leadership must have a sharing of the land that is going to be governed in partnership with the national government that is currently running the country. It will be part of the constitution. Thank you very much. Okay. No, I'm a traditional leader in Eastern Cape, most originally in Namako. But we are having a council of Amavengu there, which starts from Willowvale, Butterworth, Somo, and Butterworth. They are main traditional locations. But the other ones, the outside, Statarem, my affiliation with other structures they are working with or other development programs.
No, landless people. Is it landless movement of South Africa? Mr. Masaki.
Okay, thanks, Chair. Honorable Chair, Constitutional Review Committee, Parliament of the Republic of South Africa in Cape Town. I thank this opportunity to present our position as LAMOSA. Firstly, I'm Speaker Masake of Morey Busho in Bushbuck Ridge. You know Bushbuck, a northern area, and Entlazini in Mpumalanga province. I'm a community leader. I'm also elected on board of LAMOSA. Our democratic community structures is an affiliated to LAMOSA, and LAMOSA participated in hearings of Constitutional Review Committee about Section 25 at various public hearings and the Portfolio Committee on Rural Development and Land Reform about the Restitution Amendment Bill. Now, honorable members, before I go further, let me pronounce before you that I'm with a worker, a lawyer in LAMOSA. Mr. Hank Smith is here with me. Now, I addressed 2016, sorry, in Nelspruit. And our legal entity has still not received a title deed. Now, as I'm speaking now, in Morey Busho Traditional Authority, they are finalizing the verification process. And this is an insult to the land claimants of our area. I'm talking about the 4 portions on Vervaag, Voor Itzeg, Hebron, and Belgebonde. Same commission in our area, particularly Mpumalanga province. And they've done little to address the question of at the national level, LAMOSA monitoring reform program over 25 years and participated in 3 cases to protect the integrity of the program. LAMOSA also assists communities to implement our own action plans. LAMOSA filed
Okay, that's the end of the documentary. Thank you very much for everybody who have been watching. Brothers and sisters, in the name of the Father, the Son, God, Bayethe, Kamago, Inkomo zikaDlamini, inkomo zikaSjadu, Dweba, wena kaZizi, kaGwili, kaJama, ndithi bayethe, wena waSembo, bayethe inkomo zikaScirha, inkomo zikaTshawe, inkomo zikaTshiwo, inkomo zikaMalangana, inkomo zikaXhosa, ndithi bayethe, wena waSembo, sithi Camagu, inkomo zikaThembu, inkomo zikaGcaleka, inkomo zikaRharhabe, inkomo zikaMpondo, wena Mpondomise, Xesibe, Qwathi, Bhaca, sithi bayethe nina baSembo, inkomo zikaZulu, wena Mndebele, singene kuMaphuthi, wena kaLisuthu, Botswaneng, sithi bayethe wena waSembo. Brothers and sisters, we are greeting you in the name of the Father, the Son, bulisa lookhokho bethu abafela eli lizwe nomhlaba wethu owayo uthathwa ziintlanga ngeentlanga ezazivela ngaphesheya zangena kweli laseAfrika kwiindawo ngeendawo zaveza ubukhoboka, ingcinezelo, zithatha okhokho bethu zibasa ngaphandle kweli lizwekazi. Sithi bayethe zontsundu, sithi bayethe umoya zokhokho bethu, sithi bayethe kwigazi labangasekhoyo abakho kuthi kwigazi laSembo, sithi bayethe nina bechosi kubele. Brothers and sisters, we are remembering a very special period here in our country where the issue of land is actually at a very highest point of discussion, and there have been a lot of controversies behind the issue of the land distribution as far as who is actually part of the land ownership, So I've just actually decided with a presentation that we have been up, as far as our governance systems in South Africa are concerned, in terms of running the county, the issue of, in terms of how the land must be managed, So as far as the issue of land, it's a very, very sensitive issue, and we have gone through a number of things, in terms of us as the indigenous communities, in relation to how the land have been managed generally in South Africa amongst community. You know that in 1913, which actually made about 87% of land to be in the hands of the British monarch, so in that period, that is where most of our land was actually lost, So we are going to go through a number of dispositions in terms of showing a number of how our land was being taken, from black people, how it ended up in the hands of the colonial regime, So it's been a traumatic period. Most of our people were being killed. They died, more than 4 million, When the Portuguese arrived in 1488 in South Africa, it was a very war period, that period, where our ancestors, they fought with the Portuguese, the Portuguese actually, they first met with us in 1488 in the Cape when they were passing, but they didn't really necessarily land. They just placed a memorial stone, and they passed on. In fact, it was the French who came. The French, they were the first who came, but they didn't land. The French, they came to the southern hemisphere during the early 14th century, around the 1850s, 1440s, 1450s. So they actually passed through but they didn't necessarily landed in South Africa. John Du Bois was being sent in 1488 to come in South Africa. Placed a mark, of the Portuguese establishment in the southern hemisphere during the time of Vasco da Gama, Bartholomew Dias. You remember Vasco da Gama died from his expedition from Brazil, on his slave trade business, when he was coming to South Africa. So a traumatic period where the Portuguese, between 1488 and 1550, they were involved in a number of wars, with which the Amazizi, Amazulu were most belonging to those tribal communities, and the Amabele, and mostly they were settled along in Natal. Then the Zulu tribe was settled in Ngoma, and the Amazizi was settled along the Tugela region up to the Ukhahlamba, going down to the Cape Town region, including the Free State. And there was a breakaway. They migrated to the northwestern parts of the Namakwa land, to the northwest province, to Gauteng, establishing the other sector of the kingship, which was together with Chief Tshwane, who actually established the city, the kingdom of Pretoria, the kingdom of the city of Tshwane. So that was another period in terms of how the evolution, prevailed in that period, in terms of how the lands were being. We're going to take a look, examining some of the realities, in terms of our land. Most people, as far as I've taken you to that video, I wanted you to hear the views, from various points of views, from some political representatives, here in South Africa. I don't understand exactly what is their perception in terms of how the land, here in South Africa should be handled. So it's another issue which needs to be clarified, because our land, it's a very serious issue, that people need to understand that the land actually belongs to the traditional communities. And for us to have a successful land claim, we need to have a proper documentation as to how our land was being taken, from. This is a very, very important point, coming up with a clear understanding, of how our land was stripped off, from our people, how our people, they lost land, how the land ended up in the hands of the Dutch, in the hands of the British, in the hands of the Portuguese, in the hands of the French, in the hands of the Italians, in the hands of a number of people who have Arabs, who have came, the Hyksos, the Greeks, the Hyksos actually were the first ones to come with invasions, when we as Bantus were still settled in various locations in the African continent, because in that ancient period there were no borders in Africa. So it was very easy for our people travel as far as any place, within Africa. I'm going to just bring how we have been within the African continent freely, without boundaries, without blockages. You know where we are. Here you can see here. This is another book which is called From Afar to Zulu. You know, the Amazulu were a clan of the Amalala. You know, which were migrating together with Mzizi, my grandfather. You know, they were coming from Ethiopia, originally Egypt, and most of our scholars they were also staying in Afar in Ethiopia. Afar is a place in Ethiopia, which is in the eastern region of Ethiopia. It was actually a very important vicinity for our people, how we have looked from ancient periods. Here, this is in Afar. I will just taking you a little bit of some few pages from the book of the From Afar to Zulu, as far as you can see right there. Our ancestors, there's something which they have actually kept and preserved, you know, which is very, very, very memorial for us, because you know in that period of time we used various ways of documenting our migrations. So we were not doing through oral traditions, and some of the things that we would keep, we were in terms of how we were doing records through rock art. You know, there's a lot of rock art that have been discovered, you know, in all other regions within, and which actually describe and show and prove us, you know, prove us in terms of how we have been all over the continent, how we have migrated, how the whole continent of Africa have belonged to us as the black people. So here, this is just a page from the book From Afar to Zulu. Afar is a place in the eastern province of Ethiopia. This is just from the top of the book, as you can see right there, From Afar to Zulu, which is a place in Ethiopia where there is a lot of volcanic dams, volcanic rivers. You know, our ancestors, but where we come from, dams, there were yellow rivers, there were yellow streams. That is how it is in the Afar region. That is how there are rivers with a yellow waters, creamish, watery waters, and also there are volcanic streams flowing, special dams there, which are unique, describing the color of Ulubelu, which is an indigenous description of our colors. As is practicing, you know, in terms of using the hoes, amagaba, in terms of planting and tilling the land and planting for their own subsistence farming. So this is a practice that have been kept, a practice that have been preserved, a practice that have been within Africa for so long, you know. So let's just have a briefing of how what they're saying here. You can see the Amhara men work the soil with huge forks in the highlands of Ethiopia. You know, we are going to start there because our ancestors, they speak about these dams of the rivers Alubelu, which means it's the location, and in Ethiopia, that is where there is a town called Ambo, which describes our origin, our original locations. So when you go to Egypt, there is a town also called the Com Ombos there, which is the description of how we have migrated. And also we have used these names as our description. you know that for us as the Amazis, we trace our genealogy from Amasis who actually resided in Egypt, in the Thebes, inheriting the kingship that Mentuhotep developed, from ancient times when the monarchs were being established, in different aspects that we need to take into consideration. So here, the original social structure of the Amhara was based on a feudal society. So here, this was the governance in the Eastern continent. We will go further on that description of how the governance structures were maintained in the Eastern continent. We were just describing there the Amhara, and here we are going to abuse, in the turn of representing land, fighting for land communities, fighting for their own people. So they have actually, and this is something which needs to be communities, as to how the ancestors went through a lot of challenges, a lot of abuse, a lot of genocide, a lot of dispossession in terms of the land ownership, and it was actually our kings which I'm going to show you the list of around the 1850s in Robben Island. By that time it was possible to record some of these injustices within South Africa. So it was a very, very abusive moment where our people lost large amounts of lands. As far as I was taking you from between 1488 until 1550, actually, there was a huge period of war between the Portuguese and the Bantu nations within Southern Africa, which included mostly a painful period because most of our people were taken out of the country. During the 1470s to 1490, there was another wave of war between the Abambo and the Portuguese, between Natal and Tete Treaty. By that period, we were still together with the Zimbabwean community because how we have passed through Egypt, how we've been in Sudan for a long time, how we've been in Ethiopia, how we have been in Congo, how we passed through Malawi, passing through Mozambique, being in the southern 1,000 years ago, And in terms of the establishment of the kingdoms, the Bantu communities have been very instrumental in terms of making sure that the land management since time immemorial, and there is an evidence of the Chinese arrivals. There have been a lot of pottery, Chinese pottery, that have covered, along the Bakalanga kingship that is in the Mapatabataba kingdom in the Munabatapa, in the Great Zimbabwe walls. There it is a great evidence, of how our lands were being managed and how also the kingship of our people have lived peacefully in coexistence with each other for so long, So it's a very, very special. These are the trustees of our lands in Tsitsikamma, for us, the Abambo. We fought for that land and we have claimed these lands. It's the lands that I was talking about in the footage right there when I was speaking in the parliamentary review, because this is something that we have presented. Bambo, we are going to have our own land claim to manage, a land of all the traditional communities generally. As far as I have heard from some of the people who were commenting there, from the political figures, they're kind of like, not clear, about how we are going to manage the issue of land, and they kind of like it is not relevant in how they are being handling the debate about land, So such kinds of concepts, we can't necessarily entertain, because we have to face reality that the land belongs to the traditional communities. And it is the traditional communities who have been waging wars for more than 300 against our people. And we need to understand some of those peace treaties were fake treaties. Most of our ancestors really understood those treaties because they weren't telling the treaty that he signed with the Portuguese. After he realized that the treaty have stolen his land with the British as well, have stolen a lot of his land. So that was a lot of cheating treaties as strategic junctures of own lands. Remember the riches that are within our lands. We have the mines there that are not owned by our own people. Even currently, even as things are in South Africa, the mines are not owned by the indigenous people. The kingships are not having ownerships of the lands that produced mines. I had some, which we have presented in October in here in South Africa in Parliament, bringing in on board, how the issue of the land distribution should be maintained, in terms of how the traditional communities should manage the issue of. As far as you have seen, I want to further respond to some of the questions, that were kind of even coming after I finished with my presentation. For example, you can see the confusion from some of the members there in relation to how the issue of priesthood kingship come together. You can we are mutla umame or itsamaya jwang into ya moruti and into ya kgoshi, itsamaya jwang itimana njani yabona. So our people, they need to understand that a royalty, it is there is a royal. In Africa, royalty is a priesthood and royalty. So we are going to do more of our education to re-educate our people in terms of understanding those very important aspects that our royalties are also representing the spirituality of the nations. So in Africa, a kingship is the father of the nation, is also a priesthood of the nation. You would remember that even in Christianity, Jesus Christ is called the King of Kings, and also is being called as the High Priest. So these are the traditions, even from the Bible. These things are being documented from the time of Melchizedek. This is the priesthood that Christianity actually maintained, of a royal priesthood that came from Melchizedek. You can, ikumkani yoxola, khosi yoxola, yothando, khosi yokuthula, which means a peaceful king. So this was a very important aspect for royalty, to maintain peace among the nations. So Melchizedek, he was the grandson of Ham. Ham, he was the black child. There's something that people, they need to understand. It was not written by white. Never the Bible was written by we need to understand the original nation of the Israelite nation that comes from Abraham. We need to understand the original nation that came from Abraham. The nation of the Israelite nation, which have kept the kingship of the Jewish kingdom, have been within the African continent. It was born within the African continent in Egypt, between the Shemitic bloodline stock and the Hamitic bloodline stock, which was Abraham and Keturah, and from whence the generation of Jedish and Harry. If you remember in the Bible how he is being described is being reddish and hairy. Also, you would when we understand about the three sons of Feather as well, because that is the house where Melchizedek comes from. It, you see, Melchizedek have lived during a very, it have been called as the mountain of Noah for since time immemorial. It has been called is the mountain of Noah in Ethiopia, Africa, because remember, at that time, Jerusalem was occupied. There was a war between the Israelites and the Canaanites. And the Canaanites, they came to Africa. They came back to the land of, they migrated away from Canaan, you know. Canaan originally was from Africa before he went to stay there. It's the land called Jerusalem now, the land that where Jesus Christ was born. So that is the land that Abraham was being given to reside there during the promise that God gave him. So that is the relation. Melchizedek was originating from the house of Ham. So Melchizedek was this king of Salem and the king of peace. So within the African continent, we have been within the African continent. We are called the Bantus, you see. We are called the Bantus because we trace our genealogy from Untu. Untu is also called as Umuntu, Muntu or Montu or Mentu. Umuntu is our ancestor who have actually have a great connection from many different houses of our kingdoms. He is connected to a number of our own houses and many traditional communities within the African continent. So we trace our ancestry from Untu. Remember Untu, how he united Egypt in the Thebes during the 11th dynasty, about 2100 BC, you know, actually known as the god of war in Egypt. And he played a very pivotal role in terms of the worshipping of God in that vicinity. So here, these were the dynasties that were taking place during the time of Untu, Egypt. You know, this is Umzizi, who is the house that I represent, you know, of Umzizi. You know, he's also called as Ramesses. He was actually called as Amasis. There were different dynasties during that time, which evolved from different periods, you know, about 4 dynasties to 5 dynasties of Umzizi, from Untu being role in terms of showing leadership in that territory and also documenting and uniting the people against invasions, you know, and fighting against oppressions of invading tribes that came from Assyria, which were the Hyksos, you know, the Arabs, the first Arabs, you know, were the first to come and create invasions, you know, in Egypt during the time of Amenhotep, who was BC in Egypt. So he actually evolved the house of Umuntu as well, being a very powerful kingship. You remember how he fought against the invasion and united the people, you know, because by that time, the king before Amasis, Umzizi, he actually sold out to the Roman Empire, you know, that came in, and it became a very, very tension in terms of our own territory because that the Bantu kingship. So Libya was part of that kingdom as a very significant contributor in terms of how things were supposed to be evolving in our land tenure. So how he became a hero and he was actually given a position because at that time he was just a prince, not really necessarily within a period of taking over within the kingship. But he realized that there was a need to unite the people and fight against the selling out, and became successful in terms of reclaiming the lands in 1500 BC. We evolved, the kingship grew up because it was in connection with the eastern region. Remember, within the Kush kingdom in Ethiopia and Aksum, and also going to Napata in Sudan. The whole of that region was governed by the same related monarchs who were similar discoveries there, which prove our adventures. This is the books for the monarchs and the kingships, and the kingdoms. This is page 767 about the monarch of Ramses, as you can see right there, about how the powerful ancient Egyptian ruler have ruled in the 1279 BC of the 19th dynasty, the pharaoh of the Hebrew exodus from Egypt, mentioned in the Bible, who spent most of his reign building monuments to himself. The second longest ruling pharaoh of ancient Egypt. You see, this is Ramesses II, was the son of Pharaoh, although he succeeded to the throne at about the age of 20. You see, Ramesses was well prepared for the task while still in his teenage years. He has been designated to co-regent by his father, who took the young prime prince with him on the military campaign against the Egyptian enemies. At his age, Amasis built a new royal city in the Nile Delta, the home region of his family. He turned the city to be called with a lot of guns and orchards and canals. The city built by Hebrew slaves according to the biblical book of Exodus. In fact, the Egyptian records show that the Apiru, usually identified with the Hebrews, were among queries. Other information about Amasis, including the fact that account told in the book of Exodus, but the Hebrew, the Egypt and the Hittites, you see, actually from Assyria, it's a group of the Hyksos, it was the Hyksos tribe, Amasis served as an excellent starting point for Ramses' repeating forays into Syria, which were aimed at restoring Egyptian power in Asia in the 5th year of his reign. He led armies off on a major campaign to dislodge the Hittites from Syria. The armies of the two empires met at Kadesh on the Orontes River in western Syria, you see. So you can see how in this region we were connected, because at that time our kingdoms emerged up until the Syrians were Africans, as I've told you in the previous lecture, that there's Assyrians, the Armenians, the Syrians were Africans who migrated from Africa. So they actually represent a very important juncture in terms of have always a link with the Far Eastern countries, So this is something which our people always clip, in terms of showing the clarity of our people as and robbed and stripped off by some tribal communities, that are in that territory. We're just briefing here about the Hittites, These Hyksos, none of which changed the situation or gained any success. Amasis signed a peace treaty around 1258 BC with the Hyksos, who actually ruled between 1263 to 1005 BC, in parts as a protection against the rising power of the Assyrians in removing the Hittites' trade in Near East, and it contributed to the increasing presence of foreigners. See, these were relating to economical reasons of the Abantu people during actually, apart from the Syrian campaigns and a few successful forays into Nubia and Libya to suppress them. You see, this is how Amazizi have always maintained, since time immemorial, as far as you can see here, how we have always maintained peace and lived as peaceful people and co-other nations, who were coming from outside of the continent. That's why we've always maintained these peace treaties also with the Portuguese, when they came in the Southern Hemisphere. We signed the peace treaty in 1892. Portuguese starting here in Embo, in the Cape Colony, going up to the Zambezi River. You'll remember, and passed over the Zambezi River. His brothers Kabunduli and Piri and Banda, who established their own kingships. So there were different tribes there, which included the Tongas, which included different tribes who are also found in South Africa, in Zimbabwe, and Mozambique as well. And some of the remnants are still found in Mozambique, are found in Malawi as well. So this is how we trace and track our how we've actually went through a lot of these treaties. Signing these treaties have been an understanding of our ancestors failed behind, because there have been robberies, they have been happening that manner that they actually happened. So as far as people have been discussing the issue of the land reform in South Africa, you know, we have brought this as the United Kingdom own appropriation of land, and they must be the land, the constitutional act that is going to be given out for the Section 25 Act, you know, that the role of the traditional communities must take advantage of managing the land of South Africa, which means the kingships and the kingdoms must be able to manage the land within the southern. This is a very important thing that I stressed it out within our leaders in parliament, that this part must be not forgotten. It must be taken into great consideration, you see. So, brothers and sisters, we have been going for almost 2 hours. Actually bring this into perspective, because most of our people have been unable to have a clear understanding, you know, when it comes to these issues, you know. That's why I feel that, you know, we need to document, you know, these aspects clearly, so that our people they have a clear view as to what happened, you know, who took the land. Okay, we will at least now start with the phase of the Portuguese, you know, and the Dutch, you know, so that our brothers and sisters in South Africa, they have a clear venture as to how the Portuguese have been very instrumental in terms of actually taking place, and we need to understand details as to how the Portuguese have role. And it was in July here in 1488 how they were setting up their memorial in the Cape Colony. You can see it was in 1488. This is the cross as a sign of their belief as well in Christianity, that for them to travel and be able to meet and be there, it was a port for them to take a break, and they set up a foundation stone, you know, in the Cape of the Good Hope. You can see here how Bartholomew Dias in 1480 his at Pequina, you know, on the West Africa. You see, this is where he foundation memorial cross, which is a mass scale. Let me bring it a little bit closer so that you can see it. This is a cross, you know, which is representing Christianity, you see, which shows that the Portuguese were also on a missionary journey to establish. Remember, Alvarez was a Catholic missionary, And when they met with the Abambo, about 1,700 of the Abambo were baptized in 1893. After we have signed the peace treaty with the Portuguese, about 1,700 of the Abambo were baptized and they became Catholic Christians. But however, most of that process disappeared, over time, because our people were in the constant migrations and there were wars and there was a lot of culture change. So there were a lot of symbol of establishment, that there would be, which means you can see that it was along the west that they were traveling with, along the ocean right behind them, as you can see right there. So these are the things that, were happening in the southern hemisphere as to how the land issue was being handled, in that period in time. We signed these treaties with the Portuguese. At that period in time, we gave them some lands as well, but there were wars that took place and they robbed us our mind because there was the Lisbon king who was sent, and this marks the periods when our kingships, they suffered the loss of the lands. As the Makalanga kingdom, the Portuguese, the Makalanga kingship was established by my grandfather, Mzizi. He's the first one to be called as Kalanga, which means Kalanga. That was a title of the royalty that was being used within this territory. So he was called as Karanga or Karonga, as is called in Malawi, or Kalanga. There were a lot of different tribes, including the Tongas, which he represented. The Chewa, the Mazura. The Mazura were the Bazulu. When they migrated within the southern hemisphere, they were called the Mazura. I'm going to show you what they are actually are, at the present moment. So a very important aspect of how we have left, how our land tenure have always been here. So this is explorers and the circumvicators of the Cape, you see, as far as you are still with the as far as they have actually expounded, the colonial era of a link with their European, the Dutch, who actually came and perpetuated the colonial processes, which verified and kind of uplifted in the Berlin Conference of 1884 in this is here as the culture developed in the Western Europe, let us in Western Europe and the centers of civilization around the Mediterranean Sea. The peoples began to trade their goods in an attempt to get from others what could not be. Some lacked salt or spices for their iron for their weapons, some the ivory, amber, precious, and the semi-precious stones, gold, tin, bronze, or silver, which set great store. We as the Abambo were also very ahead in terms of working with iron, especially in the southern hemisphere. We were the first ones to work with iron, like to be able to change a stone to iron. That's why we were called the Abembi as well, which means it was part of the Ababu. We were the ironsmiths and iron material cultural objects, which we were using bases. So the Arabs were unable to use iron. That's why they were chasing us, following us, coming to this peace, So it's a very fundamental aspect of our venture that we need to understand from us. So we were into these races, as you can see here. Trade was the most important to Egypt and Mesopotamia, the land of the two rivers. The first moments towards the south, the first movements towards the south, these people who have came here in just give a briefing in terms of how people have been very instrumental, in terms of taking our lands, and also how we have lost our lands, within the southern hemisphere during the colonial explorations, of the Europeans who led within any other form of organization. It was the disposition, it was the kingdom, the kings who were fighting to protect the indigenous land. Remember, in the African communities, you see, it is the kings and the chiefs who give the people the land. Even the people themselves, they know very well that they go to the kingships or the chiefs for them to get the land. And most of the black communities or the Bantus in South Africa who own land, most of them, those land that they have, they were given by the kings and the chiefs. They were not given by the government or by the modern colonial regimes, So those lands are part of the assets, that remained in our hands. When tribes came here, we had wars with them. We fought with them, very, very brutally. And in some of those wars, we lost. In some of those wars, as part of how we have experienced, our contact with these tribal communities. So here you can see the southern tip of the African continent. Exploration of this gigantic continent, Christian era, were to pass before Africa was completely known. As far as can be determined from the earliest written records, the peoples of the Mediterranean world began to explore Africa first along the Red Sea and then further southwards along the east coast. The first Egyptian expeditions to the land of 10th century. You remember during the period of Queen Hatshepsut, he would send for myrrh, for gold, and for a number of Eritrea coming down to South Africa. Queen Hatshepsut, he traded and actually see during the era of Queen Hatshepsut. Remember, Queen Hatshepsut was a first queen to rule the period of, it was almost the 14th dynasty during that time, or roughly around that. These ones, where he used to send to the land of Pant. Pant. It's another name for the period, for the region from Ethiopia, including Kenya, going down. Century BC, they were followed by the expeditions of Tyre, which penetrated into Ophir. Ophir, as I was mentioning before about Afar, is Ophir. You would remember things about Ophir in the book of Genesis, where was being mined, was being collected, during the time of Adam. In that time, it mentions along Ophir. Ophir is also mentioned along the children of Cush. So Ophir relates to Afar, the region of Ethiopia, as far as it is known today as well. The name that is called Africa today, it comes from Ophiri, which is also called Afari. Ophiri is one of the ancient regional terminologies of African names. That's when the Greek and the people from Rome, they established their colony, which was Libya, and they named the region of Ophir, the region of Afar. So this is a very, if you understand linguistic anthropology, you would understand about what I'm talking about, and also the ethnological science in terms of how we are able to decipher it to our ancestors. They were named after our ancestors. A location in the African tribe named after our ancestors. Where there's places of Kush, it hence the place of Kush. Even Israel is the name of an ancestral name, Israel. Gold, possibly the modern Somalia, according to this scholar, but there's a lot of other sources, which also including regions to the Yemen region of Saudi Arabia. It was once again a desire to trade which prompted the Semitic Phoenicians, the people of Tyre and Sidon, the earliest among the seafaring nations, to move westwards along the north coast of Libya, past the great city of Carthage, and even beyond the pillars of the Hercules that guided the western entrance to the Mediterranean Sea. The Carthaginian made an exceptional voyage, according to fairly convincing evidence, advanced approximately the innermost corner of the Gulf, attempts to explore the west coast of Africa. 500 BC, in terms of how the Carthaginian explorations were being adventured. This was a long twilight. The east and the land of the silk was sporadic. Although the east coast of Africa, where black people lived, was known as far south as modern Dar es Salaam, an early outpost of Christendom. The secluded Ethiopian highlands was well known, and there were surmised capped mountains of the moon at the source of the Nile, in the accordance with the theories of Ptolemy. His geographical conjectures about unknown Africa were strangely enough discounted, as 1500 BC, as to this Dar es Salaam is here in Tanzania along the Zambezi region. You see, this is the period when Amasis have came here in the Malawi, Zambezi. All that community was by Amasis to this region, and it coincides exactly with the age of the connection period of how Ethiopia included the region which is called Ethiopia now, Congo. The Nile River, as far as it is talking about the source of the Nile River here, it talks about both of the sources, which along Lake Tana, and also where now it is called Lake Victoria, where the White Nile passes through, and it is joined by other streams of rivers that far goes down, joining with Zambezi. And in Zambezi, there are also other streams of rivers that joins through Zimbabwe, and they come to the Limpopo River, and from the Limpopo River, they join the Vaal, which connects to the Orange River, which come from the Drakensberg, evolving from the Drakensberg territory, which is mostly popularly known as the Amber Mountains in the southern hemisphere, which have a material cultural object which go far as 200,000 years ago, according to the radiocarbon dating of anthropology. But within the calendar system, they would actually go as far as around 1,000 to 3,500 BC. 3,500 years ago, which is approximately about 1500 BC. So it is a very, very special era in terms of how our kingships have been evolving, how we have been migrating, how we have maintained our leadership. This is a very important aspect, in terms of following up and region. So here, this is a very clear description of how even Ptolemy, you remember these were the invasions of now the Greeks, you'll remember the Ptolemy Stoter ruled around 200 BC. Ptolemy, they were observing, our legacy, because the last indigenous pharaoh to rule in Egypt, it was during the time of around 300 BC to 200 BC, during the coming of the Ptolemaic era. So here it was Claudius Ptolemy. He was a geographer in the 2nd century BC. He is describing here about how an early outpost of Christendom, the secluded Ethiopian highlands, was well known, and there were surmises concerning snow-capped mountains of the moon at the source of the Nile, in accordance with the theories in the 2nd century. His geographer conjectures about the unknown Africa was strangely enough with his quoted in. So those were just some other backgrounds as far as are concerned within the Southern Hemisphere. So there is a colonial education that have been established to kind of create, think, and understand about themselves. So lives, that we learned here in Transkei, which for reasons they have never been documented in other places. You see, so I will be taking you through the Portuguese now, just in summarizing up with the Portuguese colonial era in terms of the land dispossession. You see, I'm talking about the Portuguese that came here in South Africa. You see, this is their ship, which was like a sailing vessel here. This one, in the 16th century, the Portuguese sailing ship vessel. From Ship Through the Ages by Douglas Lobley, Octopus Books, London, 1972. So you can find evidence of this very, very important information. And here it's a map of Africa, in the 16th century, compiled by the German cartographer Sebastian Munster in his Cosmographia Universalis in 1544. So you can see here, this is the map of Africa. You can see the map of Africa being called Ethiopia, the whole of it. This is the map of Africa, is called Ethiopia. All of it is called Ethiopia by the Portuguese who came here. These are the Portuguese archives. You can see here in this map how it appears here. We are going to explore it a little bit further, just to see what was understood in that period about our demarcations, as Bantus, as we are, So this is a very important. You can see here Ethiopia of the continent of how it's being called, and here this is Libya. It's called. You can see here it's called Quiviola, and here is called. But you can see it's called here as place these names, But those were the Bakalanga and the Bakalanga naming. Here you can see this is Mali, and here this is Libya, as I was showing you. This is here is Sudan is called Renew, and here you see Pi, P-I. Also another name which is coming from Piaka. You know, Piaka was a kingdom. So this is the map. You can see here Africa was only this place which is called Libya. You see, it was called Africa. You see, as you can see there, it's called Africa. As opposed with how the whole continent is now called of it as Africa. You know, it's not. Africa is Ethiopia, the original name of the continent, because Ethiopia's, who was the grandson of Cush, he had his family migrating in a number of different locations within the African continent. So here you see the Nile River. This is how the Nile River goes down, 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 and it comes here. You see, this is where the Nile River, it almost in the middle of the African continent. You see, this is where Lake Victoria is located. You see, so you can see there how even the river Nile, it is breaking away to other streams when it is arriving within Ethiopia. So this marks a very, very important aspect in terms of how we need to gauge and understand, you know, our land demarcations from a prehistoric perspective, as opposed to what people are just being fed up with right now, you know, because they have an agenda to want to certain perceptions of how people should understand, you know, issues of land, how they should now relate to the land question, you know. So for us as the United Kingdoms of South Africa, we urge our people to rally with us, to unite with us, and support our campaigns, because we believe that the legitimate claim of claiming back, you know, our lands, it would need a proper, our kingships. You know, God is a king. God is more close to a king. God, when he comes to the his anointment from the house of Judah, the royal family, the royal kingdom, you know, which was the house, the Judah. So that house is the godly house that represents one of the chosen kingdoms. Also in operation, you know, more different from the Jewish kingdom. Melchizedek was from the Hamitic bloodline. You see in the book, even in the Bible, how can't you be like the Ethiopians unto me, oh yeah, children of Israel. You see, for Africans more than the Israelites. We read in the book of Amos, I think it's chapter 9 there, how Africa by God is even more than the nation of Israel. So there is a distinction here whereby we need to remember how Moses, he was being to serve God. Jethro was a Midianite priest who stayed with Moses for 40 years after Moses studied a lot of information from how to serve God, how to be in relationship with. So Jethro, he offered an administration formula, an administrative government that became the foundation of law that was to become even to be stolen by the Latinos, the Eurocentric governances, you know. Remember how the French Revolution, you know, for whatever venture that it was in Europe, you know, it was relating to the essence of that territory. For us as Africans, it was unnecessary for us to be affected by these Eurocentric groups have evolved in that part of the world. This is the map. This map, it have a very important feature for us. I'm sorry there for the disturbance. I just received a call, which was like just coming from somebody. Never mind about that. We'll continue. Africans, this is a very important, which means we are connected to a one ancestry, and our bloodline connect us. We are the same children of the same father. We need to cultivate that tribalism. Tribalism, it have positivity within it. Tribalistic understanding. We need to understand our tribal features. We need to maintain them and uplift them and modernize them, our own tribal communities. We should never want to dissolve and destroy our kingdoms and tribal communities in the so-called the United States of Africa, that many people are kind of like wanting to a system that looks like the United America. This kind of a perception, we need to be very broad-minded and understand from a clear perspective the dangers of this kind of a talk of a one president in Africa. Such kinds of countries and the indigenous communities and the indigenous kingdoms, that would be a biggest disaster for the African continent. Symbols of our identities, symbols of our languages. Yes, we can have kind of came in. We need to challenge them in detail. Some of the failures that Africa is facing, they are not necessarily based on the must be United States of Africa. There are things which Gaddafi have raised, which are very, very important. For example, the economy of African states and countries is still made in Europe. So we need to have our own way of manufacturing our Africans in terms of stabilizing. For us to have wealth, we need to have gold. You must have ownership of gold. How are we going to have gold as Africans if we don't have ownership of our lands? We are going to be closing in a period of 15 minutes. Clip, which have been very engaging description. We will be going further because we have been touching on these many issues, because we need to venture in the elaboration as to how Africans. So I want us to be clear about that, brothers, because there have been a lot of misunderstandings, a lot. We are going to be just reading in the book of Revelation chapter 3 in the Bible. This is the book of the prophet John, addressing Christians. The prophet John was actually undergoing a very painful period when the Israelite nation and the Christians and the Jews and were being persecuted for their traditional faith, for their culture, and for their practices and for their faith. They were killed. Thousands and thousands of millions of Christians were killed and massacred through genocides. And statistically, it is Africans who have been killed for their faith of being Christians during the period of 333 AD up until 600 AD. Most of the black people were killed on that period. When a lot of white people were still not Christians, were still pagans. They didn't know anything about God. We did a lot of work because we realized that globalization was necessary to civilize other people across the world and give a word of God, that would transform the lives of the people to understand, the values of a humanity, the values of Ubuntu, which we called as Ubuntu in Africa. That is the real Ubuntu. Ubuntu, when we talk about Ubuntu, we talk about love, we talk about peace, we talk about regard for your fellow man, not to kill somebody recklessly, not to hate someone, not to live an animal lifestyle, to have a human soul that is different from other creatures. That is the description of Ubuntu, which means that humans have a spirit that separates them from animals. So here, this is a symbol of the wealth that the prophet John describes here in the book of Revelation. He say that in the book of Revelation, chapter 3, verse just before chapter 4. Okay, we'll go about the lukewarm church. And to the angel of the church of the Laodiceans, I write these things and says, these things says the Amen, the faithful and the true witness. You see, and the true witness, the beginning of the creation of God. Know your works, that you are neither cold nor hot. I could wish you were cold or hot. So then, behold, you are lukewarm and neither cold nor hot. I will vomit you out of my mouth, because you say, I am rich, have become wealthy, and have need of nothing, and do not know that you are wretched, miserable, poor, blind, and naked. I counsel you to buy from me gold refined in the fire, that you may be rich, and white garments, that you may be clothed, that the shame of your nakedness may not be revealed, and anoint your eyes with eye salve, that you may see. As many as I love, I rebuke and chasten. Therefore, be zealous and repent. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in to him and dine with him, and he will be with me. For him who overcome, I will grant to sit with I will grant to sit with me on my throne, as I also overcame and sat down with my Father on his throne. He who has in the ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. So here, this is how John is giving his own position, is giving his own description of how we should have gold, we should have a mine of gold. So the issue of land, gold is one of the very important precious elements that God, very, very importantly, you remember how the Ark of the Covenant is covered with pure gold, because gold does not rot. It is a forever living substance, like how God is an ever living being. So is a very important thing for in our own. So people have stolen a large amount of our gold in Africa, and we need to reclaim our wealth. We need to reclaim our material cultural objects that were stolen, our works. There's a lot of our artifacts that are kept in the British museums, in the Parish museums, in the German museums, in American museums, all over the world, being auctioned, sold, loaned with millions and billions of monies, making wealth for foreign nations, while where those people who created those artifacts are starving, dying within the African continent, suffering, from colonial effects up until today, because they are suffering the land dispossessions, they are suffering persecutions that have happened, through various regimes that have been maintained and transformed through various symbols up until this period of time. So it's very important for us to have an understanding of reclaiming these indigenous locations and indigenous kingdoms. So anthropologically, we know how we have resided here for more than 200,000 years, going more than 2 million years ago. We have been developing these civilizations. We have been advancing developments here. So everybody of our brothers and sisters, they need to understand that issue. I will be going further in details now of material cultural objects on the next clip, taking the visuals to prove our existence so that our people, they don't have a doubt of their existence in this region. And they have to understand that the migrations that were happening, from point to point, it was not the first migrations. We have been migrating from here in South Africa, going up to East Africa, going to Egypt, coming back, going to the West, going to the Central Africa, coming back again to South Africa. More than 5,000 years, 6,000 years, 7,000, the historical timeline of how things have been prevailing, which have resulted in the colonial historical representation. So we are redocumenting right now in a, as to how this venture is very important for us, and also how we need to maintain that manner up until today. So, brothers and sisters, I hope very important aspects today, and how these very issues are necessary. As far as our people today are still talking about many things, they don't understand these issues, how our people are still suffering from psychological effects, spiritual effects of dispossessions, lands, wars, killings. My family have been involved to show so many of my people who have been vocal, being involved in the land struggle, claiming back the lands that were dispossessed during the colonial era in Port Elizabeth, the brutal police brutality. So those were some of the colonial wars against the lands dispossessions in Tsitsikamma, Port Elizabeth, the lands of the Abambo, which we have claimed back in Parliament 3 years ago. And it's a very, very serious process that all the traditional communities, they have to claim back those land, and they have to come back to the indigenous community. As we have seen that clip, I've been just describing how it was very important for us to bring another perspective, because you have seen how they're asking those questions. Some people, they don't understand, they don't have a represented the church, because the church, it plays a significant role in fighting back for the land. You remember here in Eastern Cape, as the Abambo Gijima in 1921, more than 160 of the members were killed, for refusing to go out of that land possession during the times of the dispossession after the act. That it marks another period. The Israelites, how, and this is the Bullhook massacre. That mother at the parliament was not. I presented the paper there. I mentioned the Ethiopian Orthodox Tiwahiro Church and also the traditional communities. So she's confused. She's confused about my role in the spiritual realm, and also in the administration realm of the houses, in terms of how the kingships should be administered. Remember, the word God communicates, as much as I was explaining to you, that this is not something that must be confused by our people. Even traditionally, as the Bantu kingships, a kingdom represents the spiritual processes of the nations. When the nation gather, it is in the community of the king that gathers the nation, and the ceremonial spiritual rituals of the community are being processed, is being done, performed as the description. So that is how the connection of the priesthood and the royal houses go together. That is how even Jesus Christ maintained the royal priesthood. If you understand how St. Peter, he say, we are a royal priesthood, we're a kingdom of priests. So this is the tradition that have been there, that Jethro educated Moses. You know, when Moses came to Ethiopia, he studied and he was taught that tradition. This is the tradition that even Melchizedek maintained. He was a high priest of God, and also he was the king of Salem. You know, that is how he is being described in the book of Genesis, chapter 14, and also in the book of in the book of 5, chapter 6, and chapter 7. For this Melchizedek, priest of the Most High, was the king of Salem, which means the king of peace. He was in Ethiopia, which means he was the king of peace. You see. So here you can see this is one of the book about the Bull Hook massacre by Urichman Mzukolile Ngwanya. You can read about this book. It's a doctor of theology in church history. Tribe. It was written for the University of South Africa. How my tribe, you know, because we have been representing the Israelite nation. So it was here in our region of Kingstown, here in the land, in the Bull Hook massacre. It was the land of the Amamfengu, the Abambo. In Kijima, it was 1941, in 1921, when they were fighting against here the Amasiraeli identity, which means the identity. So the regional territory, it was in Camerstone. That was the home of Umkijima. In Camerstone as well, it was where the Amamfengu, there's the Bambo in that period because of some other features. So it was in Intabelanga, you know, where there was a lot of some misunderstanding between the colonial regime, that there was a fight and our people, they lost the land, and it became a very abusive process, you know, to a point. About 161 people were killed there because of that process. So this is the book that describes how my people were killed in 1921, you know, being as a church, you know, fighting for the land restoration, though some other communities were not really represented as the Israelites. Other nations that who have kept the Israelite identity within Southern Africa, and they still consider themselves as well as the Israelite nation. But we will be doing that description tomorrow. I'll be elaborating our tribal connections from different places. You know, here is also touching on the issues of churches, you know, the origin of the nature and ethos regarding their Christianity and African theology. So these are the churches of the Ethiopian churches, which started, you know, Nsikane. He's the first one to give a message. Nsikane gave a message that we shall not take money. We shall not take money. We shall take a book that's written with the word of God. You see, instead of taking money, you know, we must not choose money from the nation that shall come in Africa. So this was just a saying that Nsikane said, you know, at some point in time, which kind of made a connotation to money as black people, because it is money that stray away the focus of our struggle. Money will always come if we focus on the right direction. You know, we mustn't be tempted by money by people who don't have assets. It is not money. That is the first thing that we need to understand. So it's our assets first, you know, our own assets in terms of is to protect this land so that we stay in peace. there is a need for us to have a land, and God, when He instructed us, He created this territory. He have created everything around us: animals, plants, mountains, and the rivers, the waters around us. It makes sense. The plants, the everything. I mean, it have a purpose in our existence. So we have to be thankful to our Creator. We have to be thankful to uNkulunkulu. We have to be thankful to the forefathers who have sustained this heritage that we have, whether be it a Xhosa heritage, be it a Zulu heritage, be it a Swazi heritage, be it a Sotho heritage. These traditions, we need to embrace them. We uplift them to a modern way. Period that arrived for the past 500, 600 years with the Portuguese, and they have blocked the Bantu evolution, the Bantu development. They've blocked our freedom to operate with. Yeah, when they came, we were doing mining, and we were already in contact with other outside world. So development should have happened in a positive means, not in a means of oppressing other people. Those issues, because each and everything, it have its own time. We are in other generations right now. Our ancestors were living in another generation. We know everything that have happened right now. Our own migrations, we understand our land tenure, and we don't need people who are still possessed with a negative understanding that as Africans we don't have ownership. We're migrants. We're us as the Bantus with the core and the sand. We are the same. We can't rely on such kinds of things. So we are going to deal, and we are not afraid of any negative thing that may arise along our lives. We know some people, they've insulted us, that we must go to hell, we are Satanists or so ever, how dare people would come, this political party lead, and lack of appreciation of our own indigenous. It will be very myopic for our own people to perpetually cling on that kind of a belief that leaders are sell out indigenous communities. Remember when the freedom move organizations were established, they were established with the mandates of the royal houses, because it was known that it was the kings who were fighting for lands, and the land belonged to the kingdoms. That issue, it needs to be clear in the minds and the spirits of the black community land. So these issues need to be maintained. But now we'll be able to balance these issues with the modern means of our people to bring achieve, because these systems of governance have been brought as well as form of compromise, by these white people, colonial regimes who have kind of a culture as a form of still perpetuating we are today. Systems process and deal with the factors from the core, and things, they start with the spirit. We can never think that we will defeat the oppressive systems just materialistically, people being obsessed with material things, being possessed with everything that is unnecessary out there. So we need to cast away and kind of renew the spirit and rebaptize the spiritual path of our black community, and to exercise the black community to a new birth of understanding of our own identity, our own cultural values, rebuilding the spirits of our ancestral understanding of how our ancestors, they related to God, during the time when they were speaking and seeing God with their eyes. So they were living very holy lives. They were living very pure living lives. They were saved. They were not dying. They were able to see the miracle. So these are the things that we should always have faith in them, and have an understanding that even in the modern generation, we're able to witness those things if we come back to our own identity. Result, the Creator, uNkulunkulu, our ancestors oppress Africans, oppress the African continent, west to the east, from north to the south. So brothers and sisters, we need to have that understanding that we will have a process of healing. You know, we know the trauma, we know the negativity that have been created by faith communities like the churches, different religious communities across the country, in trying to bring a socially cohesive understanding in terms of Africa. We should structure them and maintain them within the United Kingdom of South Africa as a venture. So the parliament have requested me that I should table this process, and it have taken almost about 3 years now working on a document. And we've finished the document, and we know that Dr. Mahlati is Madlamini. She's from my region, you know, it's part of the Abambo, the Amafengu, and it's also my family member. She's my sister from about 500 years, but it's belonging to our family of the Amazizi from the house of Lamine. So she's a very active leader, being in the agricultural sector, farmers. You know, we have partnered with them and worked with them, and also she has a very significant role because she was elected when I was in Ethiopia. I was not around, so they called her when about 3 black people, about 2 white people, and a colored representative. So there have been a lot of ideas, 100% supporting it, you know, because it is now kind of like wanting to target the traditional lands. Remember, the President Ramaphosa, before we went to present our papers in Parliament, those lands, they already belong to the black communities. So there's no need for us to take that land for expropriation. The land that must be taken is the land black people, the dispossession, who must get back the land. It must be cleared out. I made it clear this issue in Parliament 2018 that the land must be brought back to the black people, the indigenous communities. That through the processes, and people must respect the processes, because we are not playing games when we mean the issue of the land claims, bringing back the resources. It's a very serious fundamental aspect to bring transformation of the Bantu communities, the black people, to communities, to a highest level of ownership. And if you would love to connect with us, you're welcome to our page, and you can inbox us there on the United Kingdoms of South Africa. You can inbox us there as well on the Abambo, the Fingos. We are also in touch there. We also have a university that we have established, the Millennium Leadership University, because my family, as far as I've always reminded you, that here in my village, we established this College of Brightwood as a symbolic institution in 1876. Just to build this university because it makes a lot of impact for us, have a lot of value for us, it have a lot of meaning for us. So we cannot abandon our heritage, we cannot abandon our efforts. So we have developed an education to share information with the coming generations to understand about all these things that have a book about the Bible, which is more than 100 pages, you know, where different timelines. They need to understand what happens, you know, why we need to go further and describe, you know, our descriptions, and also how our communities have always lived together and maintained a united, cohesive, communal living within the African continent. We have also our brothers and sisters in the diaspora who are very, very important parts of our lives, you know, whom I have worked with them very importantly. We have a venture of working with them. You know, as the United Kingdoms of South Africa, we're not only working within the southern region, we're also focusing on working within the, hence we have the United African Empires, which we have advanced as a contact with other kingdoms, you know, that I met with them, even with the Royal House of Ethiopia. In Ethiopia, we have met with them. We came up with a project of developing these initiatives. So these are the history of the African kingdoms. You know, this is the African kingdoms here. As you can see, here the kingdom, the kingship, and the gods. You see, as this is relating just to answer the question of some questions that the mothers in the parliament they are confused about the relationship of religion and the kingdoms. You know, symbol that you can see of the bed of the Bakalanga, the people of the sun, you see. And this is the image statue of Khafre. You know, Khafre is also how the white people, they call us the Kafirs, you know. They call us the Kafir because of Khafre. Khafre was a king of the Bantus in the ancient Africa. This is where we trace our genealogy. It was part of the Bantu kingdoms. So when the British, when they came here, they called us the Kafirs, you know, because of Kafre. They knew that we come from Kafir, you know. This is also how the Arabs, they were calling us the Kafirs, you know. It is not altogether an insult people to call us Kafirs, you know, but they have derogated that name to another level to become a derogatory terminology, but it comes from Kafre. Kafre, who was a king. This is the book that I recommend for you by Samuel Noah Kramer. You know, it says the kingships and the gods. So this is the bed that was found. You see, this is the eagle bed that was found here in South Africa, in Mpumalanga. It is a symbol of the Bakalanga. This bed in Zimbabwe, in the Great Zimbabwe walls. It is also there. Also, you'll find it in the flag of Zimbabwe, and also it is found in the Egyptians pyramids. It is found in the Ethiopian churches. You know, the eagle is also the symbol of of the apostle. I think the apostle Saint Luke. The eagle symbolizes the king of the air, the kingdom of the air. So the kingdom of the air is under the bird, this bird called the eagle. This is the angelic figure within the spiritual realm. Hence the kingships and the gods. So God, you know, God, He is also the God of gods, you know, the creator. He's the Lord of lords. Hence Jesus Christ is called the Lord of lords. He's the King of kings. As the people on earth, we also have the earthly kingdoms. I've read that chapter for you about how we inherit the throne of the kingdom of God. I've read that the chapter for you in the book of Revelations, chapter 3, the wealth of the kingdom of God that we have been entrusted as Christians to inherit, you know, from the throne of the kingdom of heaven, how we have been given that inheritance from the kingdom of God to inherit, and also for those who belong in that kingdom, and within our upliftment of our kingships. These are the things as Africans that now, as the United Kingdoms, we are advancing. People won't be misled by information that is unnecessary. Our colonizers who have felt that for them outline, they have to hijack our history. We need to rephrase, we are going to document our ancestors. Brothers and sisters, thank you very much. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, I thank you. May God bless you. May you be saved. May you be strengthened. May you be empowered. May you be challenged by this presentation. May it inspire you. May we engage in the conversations of our tribal communities. May we be united beyond divisions of tribes, you know. This is another book I would recommend for you, The History of the Border Disputes Between the Livingstonia and the Coma Synods and the Church of the Central Africa Presbyterians. It touches on some historical outlines of how our tribes of Mzizi, my grandfather, and established the kingdoms and the kings around this region of the southern hemisphere. I would recommend for you to go through this. It is very important, you know. This is also another information about my grandfather, how he established the Kalanga Empire, which is the empire that the Portuguese they found here in southern hemisphere. And when they arrived, there was a peace treaty that we signed. This treaty was also filled with a cheating agenda, you know, in terms of how the possessions of the lands must be. I always recommend for our brothers and sisters to understand, you know, how the prehistorical adventures have been taking place. This is the Lake Nyasa, you know, how we have been migrating during. So going further to describe this, you know, about what does it mean. You see here it talks about on raises beaches of Lake Nyasa in the Karonga area. Current father Zizi, who was the first one to be given called Karonga Kalanga, which means as the son. It refers to the that have been preserved through oral traditions, you know. Here, the Berber, the Tuareg. You see, the Tuareg are the Tongas. In the northern east, they to the symbol as the former is the Berber and the latter is the Kushite. Is to describe the 9 Negroic peoples of the northeastern African who do not speak the Semitic languages. Sometimes, because some of these scholars they have not been initiated and they don't really belong to our tribal communities. They study these things from an outside perspective, being in the West, being in America, document, you know, as far as they can. So here we're going as far as 3,000, 10,000 BC, you know, of how, you know, and migrated, and there have been a number of these the Bantu migrations, you know, features, you know, the Bantu migration some 5,000 years ago. Africa was already inhabited, you know, by 4 main racial types recognized in the historical by 4 main, you know, which means sometime, you know, they been classified according to these descriptions. Then the Bushmen and the Negro, this terminology, you know, and the Bushman and the Pig Mike, original, aboriginal, tribal races of Africa that comes as far back before the time of the after Noah, after the floods. So there was a beginning of the tribe. So the Negroic tribe and the Bushman and the Pygmy tribes, it's the original tribe that the Kushite tribe comes from it. Noah belonging to the Negroic blood stock Noah. And then hated as far as we have back to this period in time, you see. So the large Cushitic as far this is the Bantu do not constitute genetically an ethnic group, for there is no homogeneous together of words and classes distinguished by pairs of singular and plural prefixes such as umuntu, that it means person or human. This is the name that Adam was given. Adam means human, which is synonymous with umuntu. This is also as the Negro we are called. So this is the classified terminology, the inherited meaning from Adam. So we are the bloodline of Muntu. For the time of Muntu Hotep, who ruled Egypt, it was the reincarnation, that name of creation. I'm going to show you in the book of Genesis, in existence. You know, we are going to be closing now a long time. Chapter 2, verse 18. And the Lord God said, it is for, you see here, just you can see right there, so that you can read with me. Okay, there it is. It is not good for the man. Okay, he said the Lord. Okay, let's start in the book in chapter, in chapter 15, chapter 2, verse 15. Then the Lord God took the man and put him in the garden of Eden. You see, and the Lord God commanded the man, saying, "Oh, every tree in the garden." So that was the time that man was created. You see, but so far, it is in this chapter where you will find the name of Adam. You see, and also its meaning of how it means person, the meaning of Adam, as well as how the instructions were being called, you know, to take place in that era. So the name person, that's how it relates to, as well, to the Bantus, to the Negroes. So this is the classifications of the millet. The millet is the food that we were planting as the Bantus, even here in South Africa. When the Portuguese came, we were planting the millet and also sorghum, which is sorghum is differently called as the leucine and the penicetum. So these are very important descriptions for us to understand of how use these very important material cultural experiences. So brothers and sisters, thank you very much for your time in the Holy Spirit. Inkomo zikajama, inkomo zikadweba, inkomo zikajadu, ndithi bayethe nina basembo, bayethe bantu basembo, bayethe bantu bakuthi, nihlale niqine elikhulu kakhulu bantu basekhaya. Ingase siqine kakhulu, singapheli ithemba kuba eli dabi eli linempumelelo ekusiphelweni. So funeka siqine, singapheli amandla bantu bakuthi. So may the Lord be with you, bless you in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Gameni loyise nokhokho bethu, bantu bonke abathembu, amaqwathi, amaxesiba, amampondomise, amabomvana, abakhoyisena, amaPedi, abaTswana, abaTlana, amakhuze, abahlubi, and all the tribes of our nation, you know, they are part of the United Kingdoms of South Africa, and we are very thankful for you know, for having moved with us, for having welcome. This is a very important engagement. We hope that we'll be together as well next time. God bless you. uNkulunkulu anisikelele. Amaku bayethe bechosi kubele bayethe.